There is a geopolitical earthquake rumbling through Uvira, a border town in South Kivu, Eastern Congo. The crazy thing though is this: the world seems oblivious of this earthquake. I'm going to tell you all about this earthquake and why it matters to you, wherever you are in the world, but especially here in Africa. Uvira is an amazing, amazing town that sits on the shores of Lake Tanganyika. It is also surrounded by mountains, and it's only 26 kilometers from Bujumbura, the capital of Burundi. That's very, very important. It's very important because it speaks to the international nature of Uvira. Why is this earthquake happening? First of all, I want you to imagine something. Imagine having to flee from your home right now. Like this moment that I'm talking to you, imagine at a moment's notice having to flee from your home. You don't have the luxury of carrying your belongings. You can only flee with whatever you can carry. Imagine that. Imagine knowing that your home, in a very short while, is going to become a death factory. So you have to flee if you want to remain alive. That's exactly what has happened to 200,000 residents of Uvira. 200,000 are now internally displaced. 20,000 have had to flee across the border into Burundi. Why are they fleeing from their homes? Because M23 has captured Uvira. Uvira has fallen into the hands of M23. That's why the residents of Uvira have had to flee. Now, you and I don't have to flee from our homes because we're not in Uvira. However, the capture of Uvira is going to have repercussions that will affect you and I in our homes, wherever we are in the world, especially in Africa. Here's why. There are 5 major consequences that come with the fall of Uvira into the hands of M23. 5 major consequences. And 2 of those consequences have a direct bearing on you and I in our homes, whatever the number of kilometers we are away from Uvira. Let's start with the first consequence. Burundi's national security is now under threat. Burundi has been the poorest nation in the world for several years. It always comes on top of the list of the poorest nations. Its economy is already in the doldrums. The amazing people of Burundi are already suffering like crazy. And now, 26 kilometers away from Bujumbura, the capital of Burundi, M23 sits there. M23 is a mere 26 kilometers away because they have captured Uvira, and Uvira is only 26 kilometers from Bujumbura. So Burundi is now facing one of the most serious national security threats that it has ever faced in recent times. Burundi's Foreign Affairs Minister put it very clearly when he said that a threat to Uvira is a threat to Bujumbura, and by extension, a threat to the entire Burundi. And now that Uvira is actually in the hands of M23, that is a serious, serious warning signal to Burundi. That's the first consequence of Uvira falling into the hands of M23. The second major consequence fatal consequence of Uvira falling into the hands of M23 is this: Burundi's national economy is now facing serious headwinds. I mean, this economy was already suffering even before Uvira fell into the hands of M23. So much so that oil is an extremely scarce commodity in Burundi as we speak. People have to queue and queue to access fuel when it's there. Otherwise, it is rarely there, which means that the rest of the economy by extension is severely affected because fuel, oil, plays a critical role in the economy of any nation, and it's just not there in Burundi. Now, add to that the fact that 90% of Burundi's exports are now seriously affected. Exports to Congo. Because you see, Burundi borders Congo, and Burundi exports a lot to Congo. But 90% of those exports are now affected. Burundi cannot export these goods and commodities. Why? Because 90%, these 90% was passing through Uvira into the hinterland of Congo, into the interior of Congo. Yet, now they cannot do that because Uvira is in the hands of M23. This brings me to the third major consequence of Uvira falling into the hands of M23. In South Kivu, the province that Uvira is a part of, there's a town known as Minembwe. Minembwe town is predominantly populated by the Banyamulenge ethnic community. Now, Minembwe town is under the blockade of the Burundian army and several militias affiliated with Congo's army. These forces, these security forces, have placed Minembwe under blockade. Since May, 172,000 Banyamulenge in Minembwe and that region have not been able to access necessary goods. They have not been able to access humanitarian aid because their town is under blockade. M23 has made it clear that they're going to put that to an end, and it's already collapsing because the Burundian army, those militias affiliated with the Congolese army, many of them have already left. They have already abandoned their outposts. So this is a positive consequence because these 172,000 people are innocent civilians who should not have been under blockade in the first place. As I always say, every innocent and armed civilian is not your enemy, is not your enemy. And we must always have a lesser focus on ensuring that civilians of any stripe, of any ethnicity, are taken care of and not facing the barrel of the gun. So it is good news if these 172,000 Banyamulenge civilians will no longer be under blockade. That does not in any way, shape, or form dilute the crimes of M23. I'm just saying that they should never have been under blockade in the first place. Now, things are a bit more complicated though. It's not that the Burundian army or the Congolese army just wanted to put them under blockade. You see, the Banyamulenge, just like many other communities in Congo, in Eastern Congo especially, have militias that protect them, militias that take advantage of them in the name of protection. The Banyamulenge in Minembwe and in the wider South Kivu region also have their militias. And these militias are fighting against the Congolese army. These militias are coordinating with M23. So the quest to dilute the power of this Banyamulenge militia led to that blockade, and the innocent civilians were suffering as a result. They will now be free. They will now not be under the blockade, rather. Which begs the question, what then will happen when this militia, the Banyamulenge militia, is now going to be emboldened, is now going to be a lot more strengthened because they will have free movement in the area? Not just that, but they're going to be able to collaborate. They're going to be able to actively network and work alongside M23, which only makes M23 even stronger. So that is something that the international community that is focused on peace in Eastern Congo must be able to look at such seemingly small occurrences and make decisions that will address that. This brings me to the final two major consequences. Two major consequences that have a direct impact on you, right there where you're sitting, watching me saying these things. These final two consequences have a direct impact on you. Now, when M23 took over Uvira a couple of days ago, do you know what they said? They said, Uvira, check. Next, Katanga. Next, Katanga. Katanga region is the most mineral-rich region in Congo, a country that is already one of the most mineral-rich in the world. And Katanga region is the most mineral-rich region in Congo. In terms of strategic industrial mines that are in Katanga, they include the world's largest reserve of cobalt. 60% of the cobalt in the global supply chain today is from Katanga. They also include massive deposits of copper. Katanga has massive deposits of copper, massive deposits of lithium. That's the reason Katanga is the backbone of Congo's mineral economy. So, when M23 says, Uvira, check, next, Katanga, that is an earth-shattering statement that has global repercussions. Here is why that is not an empty threat. You see, Uvira was the last major defensive position of Congo's army and its allies before a town known as Kalemie. Kalemie is in Katanga and it's 386 kilometers from Uvira. Once M23 reaches Kalemie, it's going to be in Katanga. And Kalemie is a logistical hub in the Katanga region. That is the next target of M23. The day that you hear that M23 has reached Kalemie and taken over Kalemie, just know that things are about to get absolutely crazy. The day that M23 reaches Kalemie, it means that they will already be in Katanga. And just like they have taken over Bukavu, taken over Goma, taken over Uvira, it will then mean that it's extremely feasible, probable, possible that they will be able to take over Katanga. And that prospect is going to have global repercussions. Remember, that cobalt that I told you about, the largest cobalt reserve in the world is right there in Katanga. And guess the biggest beneficiary of that? It's China. China has the most cobalt mines in Katanga, and China will not just sit there idly as M23 appears to take over that region, if it comes down to that. Remember, China has its allies, like Russia. They will not just sit there idly, because they know very well that M23 is supported by Rwanda, and the US is a strong ally of Rwanda, even though they are projecting an image of neutrality. But they are an ally of Rwanda. So it will be so easy for yet again, a deadly proxy war to be fought right here on African soil. And if it comes down to that, what you're seeing happening in Sudan, which is also a proxy war, will be replayed in an even graver fashion in Congo. Now, once you understand that, if that cobalt can no longer reach the multinationals in the West that make these products that you and I use, these electronic products, the electric vehicles, then there's going to be a chain reaction and we will all feel the impact. Which brings me to the final consequence of M23 taking over Uvira. In one word, that consequence is peace. What does that do to peace? There's a very easy answer and a very complicated answer. What does M23's conquest, takeover of Uvira do to peace in Congo? Because of these potentially global implications that I've just explained, it means that the quest for peace becomes even more complicated because the stakes are a lot higher. Now, not just for Rwanda or Congo or Burundi, but for the global geopolitical players. The stakes become a lot higher for them. And when the stakes become a lot higher, for those who are in the shadows of a proxy war, this war becomes a lot easier to be prolonged. That's why you may not have had to flee from your home like those 200,000 residents of Uvira, but you will be affected right there in your home if peace does not prevail in Congo sooner rather than later. My name is DJ Bokali, and you can be sure that I will keep you informed about what's happening in Congo, what's happening in Africa. But more than keeping you informed, we are going to increasingly look at what we can all do to ensure that peace prevails, to find solutions to these seemingly intractable problems that we face here in Africa. We are going to keep using this African Awakening show to zero in on pragmatic, practical, innovative, revolutionary solutions. Because Africa is our superpower.